In the bamboo grove after rain, the air was thick and still. The leaves glistened with droplets that reflected the pale sunlight filtering through. A young mother stood holding an infant wrapped in a soft cloth. She rocked gently from side to side, her face a mix of patience and worry as she tried to soothe the baby's cries. From nearby, an old woman emerged with a small handcart piled high with clay teapots. She moved slowly, each step careful on the damp earth. Her eyes caught sight of the young mother and her fussing child. Without speaking, she approached them and placed a sturdy wooden stool beside the mother. Then she knelt down quietly and began sorting through her cart for something. From her collection, she pulled out a small bag of dried herbs and carefully brewed a pot of tea over a tiny fire she built from dry twigs. The steam rose in clouds as she added leaves to water and stirred with a twig. Once the brew was ready, she poured it into an earthen mug and handed it to the young mother. The woman accepted the tea without words. She held it close to her chest, letting the warmth seep through the fabric of her dress. With one hand free now from holding the infant, she could sip at the hot liquid. The baby's fussing quieted as the smell of herbal tea filled their air. "Thank you," the young mother said softly after a few sips. The old woman smiled and nodded but didn't say anything more. She packed away her cardigan carefully and stood up straight, collecting herself. Before she turned to go, she handed over one of the clay teapots from her collection. It was simple, with no decoration, just its own dark brown earthiness. "It's yours now," said the old woman, handing it gently to the young mother, who took it in both hands and held it close like a treasure. The old woman bowed slightly before turning away and making her way back down the path toward town, leaving them behind with her quiet gift. The young mother watched the retreating figure until she was out of sight, then looked down at the baby again. She smiled this time, not just from worry but from something more tender and thoughtful in her face. The tea finished, warm still around their hands, they sat together for a while longer under the green canopy above them, sharing the quiet. As evening approached, the young mother began to pack away what few belongings she had brought along with her baby for this outing. She placed the clay teapot carefully inside the basket beside her. The sound of it resting among other things was like a soft whisper echoing back from all that had happened during their time in the bamboo grove. With one last look over at where the old woman might have gone, she started down the path leading away with both hands steady on the handles, and the little teapot nestled safely within.
You're listening to the Empty Teahouse. The clay teapot felt warm against her palm, holding memories of comfort. In the quiet alley between two clay walls, dried herbs hang and a herbalist rests, watching passers-by blur by in the dusk.
In the quiet alley between two clay walls, a man with weathered hands and worn boots sits on a low stool beside an open door. Inside, dried herbs hang from strings strung across the room in neat rows. A herbalist is arranging them into small bundles for sale or use. Outside, he rests his chin in his hand and watches the passers-by, each one a blur of color against the dull earth. The sound of soft footfalls approaching makes him look up. Standing there is an old woman with a basket slung over her arm. She looks at him as if she knows him, but then her eyes move past him to where herbs are drying. "May I come in?" she asks without waiting for an answer. He stands and moves out of the way so she can enter. Inside, she hangs her basket from a nail on the wall next to a large pot of water bubbling over a fire. She pulls up another stool beside him. They sit silently for a moment until the herbalist speaks. "What brings you here?" "I was walking back from my daughter's place," she begins, picking at an old wrinkle in her skirt. "I passed this way and remembered something." She pauses to look around at the herbs drying overhead like hanging flowers. "Is there anything you need?" he asks. "No, I just wanted to see this." He looks at her curiously, waiting for more. She continues quietly. 30 years ago, a boy came down this alley with a bag of seeds. He was heading out into the world and asked me for a cup of tea. I gave it to him but wished he'd stay. She smiles sadly. The man nods slowly. The fire crackles in front of them. I've always wondered what happened, she says, more to herself than to him. So many years have passed. He thinks back on her words and speaks up softly. I stayed longer than I thought I would. He clears his throat and picks at the rough hem of his shirt sleeve. She glances over at him sharply, then looks away again. Her hand reaches for one of the hanging bundles, but she stops before touching it, instead placing both hands in her lap. They sit together with only the sound of their breaths filling the space between them. Then he breaks the silence. Would you like a cup of tea? She nods slowly and turns to him fully. A small smile plays at the corners of her mouth. He goes inside and returns quickly with 2 cups on a tray, careful not to spill. She accepts one and blows on it gently before sipping. He watches her as she drinks, noting the lines of age around her eyes and lips softened by warmth and memory. After they finish their tea, she thanks him quietly. You were only young once too, she says simply, rising from her stool and picking up her basket again. Will you tell your daughter? He asks as she prepares to leave. She looks at him oddly for a moment, then smiles again. Maybe. She turns back towards the alley and steps out into the sunlight. He watches her go until only her shape remains in his vision, gradually fading from sight. As silence returns between the clay walls, he reaches up to touch one of the hanging bundles, feeling the papery leaves crinkle under his fingers. A faint breeze stirs them slightly, causing a soft rustling sound that carries on the air like a whisper.
The door creaked softly, leaving only the scent of dried herbs behind. Dust motes danced again as an old woman pushed her tea cart into shadows, wheels groaning over cobblestones at dusk.
In the quiet alley between 2 clay walls, dust motes danced in the slant light of a late afternoon sun. An old woman pushed her tea cart into the shadows, where the air felt cooler and thicker with evening scents. Her feet moved steadily over the cobblestones, but the wheels of her cart groaned with each turn. A child emerged from a doorway, her arms full of dried flowers to be sold on market days. She paused, tilting her head to look at the old woman's cart. "Can I help you, ma'am?" she asked softly. The old woman nodded and pulled out an envelope wrapped in string. "Would you take this to my sister? It's not far, just across from the old mill." The child hesitated, looking down at the heavy basket balanced on her hip. "I can't leave it here," she said with a frown, but she set the flowers on the ground and took the envelope without another word. "I'll be quick." The old woman watched as the girl darted into the sunlight. She waited, hands resting lightly on the wheel of her cart. When the child returned moments later, breathless and cheeks pink with exertion, the old woman smiled and thanked her. "You're very kind," she said. "Would you like a drink to cool yourself?" The child nodded eagerly. The old woman set up her small stove, flames catching in a burst of sparks before settling into a steady burn. She poured water from an earthenware jug into 2 cups, adding tea leaves that bloomed in steamy tendrils. They sat on the steps leading down to the alley, sharing space and air. Neither spoke much. The old woman hummed a tuneless melody as she watched the child sip her drink slowly. Afterward, the girl packed up her flowers again but lingered before stepping away. "Will you come back?" the old woman asked quietly. The child looked at her with wide eyes, then nodded solemnly and waved as she retreated into the light. When night fell, a faint breeze stirred the clay walls, carrying whispers of leaves from the nearby park. The old woman packed up her cart, moving silently in the dark alley. She glanced back once at the spot where they had sat together, the space now empty under the moonlight.
The alley remained quiet, save for faint footsteps retreating. In the heart of winter, empty streets around a noodle stall are covered in snow. Inside, steam rises through a window while people outside breathe wisps against the cold.
In the heart of winter, the streets around the noodle stall are empty. The snow muffles the sound of boots and coats are pulled close against the cold. Yet there is warmth inside the little shack that serves steaming bowls of noodles late into the night. Through a window at one end, steam rises and mixes with wisps of breath from people outside. One evening, a man who looks worn down by his travels stops near the stall. His eyes are red-rimmed as though he hasn't slept in days, and his hands tremble slightly when he lifts them to rub his face. He steps closer, his shoulders hunched against the chill wind that blows through narrow alleyways. The noodle seller sees him watching from a distance and calls out quietly, "Come now, you'll freeze if you stand there all night." But the man hesitates, as though weighing some great decision before he finally nods. With slow steps, he approaches the stall and stands by the window, looking in. The seller waits for him to speak, but finds only a silent nod again. "Sit down," she says, pulling out an extra chair beside her own. "I've got noodles cooking." He shuffles over and sits down slowly, hands resting on the table's edge as if afraid to let go. She fetches bowls from behind the counter and fills them with steaming broth and slippery noodles. "Thank you," he mutters after his first mouthful of soup, steam rising around him in small clouds. The noodle seller watches him eat without pressing for conversation. The man's gaze wanders beyond the stall, past rows of shadowed buildings to where the street lamps cast pale glows through layers of snowflakes dancing on cold air currents. He sighs deeply and picks up his spoon again. Sometime later, when he finishes eating, she hands him a clean cloth for wiping his mouth and chin. Then she points toward the back of her stall where extra coats hang beside an old kettle. "Take whatever you need," she says simply. "It's cold tonight." He looks at the offerings warily before hesitantly reaching out to grab one particularly worn but still warm coat. He wraps it around himself, and then, without any words or signs of gratitude, he starts to leave. She calls after him gently, though he doesn't turn back. The door closes softly behind him, a thin line of cold air slipping into the stall as if announcing his departure. Inside, she begins cleaning up from their meal in silence, her movements slow and steady. Outside, the night deepens with each snowflake that falls until only whispers of wind are heard. She wipes the counter once more before turning off the last light. As darkness envelopes the street outside, a cat appears beside one of the shadowed buildings, meowing softly for warmth. The woman pauses and opens her stall door just enough to let out an old shoe tied up with string containing food scraps and morsels collected during the day from generous customers. She watches until the cat disappears into the night before closing the door again. Inside, as she settles down for a moment of quiet rest, she listens to the hush of falling snow outside her stall, then closes her eyes briefly in contentment at the small sounds and warmth left behind by one who needed help tonight.
The snow settled quietly over the night street. Two figures moved slowly among autumn rice stalks at dusk, one old and bent like time's bridge, the other walking silently beside him.
In the rice paddy at the end of harvest season, two figures moved slowly among the rows of golden stalks. The sun hung low in a sky streaked with pink and orange as autumn made way for nightfall. One was an old man, his back bent like an arching bridge over time's river. Beside him walked a younger woman, her hair tied back tightly under a kerchief. They moved silently, the only sounds being their soft footsteps on damp earth. The rice paddies stretched far and wide from them, bordered by tall grass that whispered in the gentle wind. Stacks of harvested stalks stood like sentinels around them, reminders of what had been gathered and prepared for the winter ahead. Yet among these golden towers, there were pockets untouched, left to wither or be reclaimed by the earth. The old man paused beside one such spot where a small pile of rice stalks lay abandoned, the rest scattered about as if someone had run away from their work mid-task. He reached down and picked up a stray stalk, running his calloused fingers over its grains. The woman watched him, her face shadowed with questions she hesitated to ask. "I remember when I was young," he began after a moment, the words seeming to come unbidden from the quiet air around them. "I made many mistakes, thoughtlessly. A single day's anger could destroy months of good work." He looked at the woman beside him. "But every year, I learn more about how things grow and die in this field." She nodded, her eyes fixed on his hands holding the rice stalk. He continued softly, "This field taught me patience, not to act rashly. Each seed must be planted carefully, tended with care through storm and drought. And yet, even if we forget for a day or two, it doesn't mean all is lost." They walked toward an area where water trickled over the paddy's edge into a small stream beyond. The old man knelt beside the water, his hand running down to cup some in his palm. "Water washes away dirt," he murmured more to himself than her. "But it also cleans what is inside." The woman stood by him for a while before speaking. "Do you ever think about those who left?" He turned to look at her, the light catching his worn face. "Every day. Just like I see this field, sometimes full and sometimes bare." His gaze traveled over the paddy again. "But it doesn't mean we stop trying." She bent beside him now, taking a handful of water herself. As she rinsed her fingers, a single rice grain slipped out from between them, floating gently down the stream. They both watched its journey for some time before turning back towards their village home as evening deepened around them. Neither spoke again until they reached the door, pausing one last moment in the cool air outside. The woman turned to him then, offering a small smile that softened her usual sharp edges. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and squeezed briefly before entering the house ahead of him. Inside, she hung up her kerchief with care, leaving it smooth and neat as though preparing for another day's work. The old man watched from the doorway until she disappeared into the kitchen light, then turned to hang his own coat beside hers, a silent agreement between them. As he settled by the hearth, readying himself for the evening fire, an owl hooted softly outside in the gathering night, its sound carrying over the rice paddy like a note of peace.
The lantern flame swayed once, steadying again in the quiet of evening fields after harvest. The lamps dim at the empty tea house. Until tomorrow.